On the night of November 22nd, 1987, American television broke a rule it was never supposed to break. It wasn't a power outage, and it wasn't a technical failure. It was an extraction. For roughly 90 seconds, a pirate signal overpowered the networks in Chicago. A masked figure hijacked the airwaves, severing the connection between the station and the city, and spoke directly into millions of living rooms. No demands were made, no identity was revealed, just a face that wasn't supposed to be there. It remains the most famous act of video piracy in history, a moment where the screen looked back at us and laughed. 38 years later, the mask remains on. The FBI couldn't solve it, the FCC couldn't trace it, and the silence is louder than the static. To understand the violation, you have to understand the era. In 1987, the internet was a ghost. There was no streaming, no on-demand reality. Television was the national hearth. It was authoritative, one-directional, safe. The public trusted the signal because they believed it was untouchable. Broadcast towers were the gatekeepers of reality, fortresses of information, towering over the skyline, blasting thousands of watts of power into the ether. They spoke, we listened. The idea that an outsider could scale those walls, not with money, but with force, was unthinkable. It would be like someone walking onto the set of the nightly news and taking the anchor's chair. But the intruder didn't just want to break in. They wanted to watch the world glitch. They chose a mask that was already a symbol of the artificial. Mac's Headroom. Max was a parody of corporate media, hosted by corporate media. A computer-generated host who stuttered, glitched, and mocked his own existence. By wearing his face, the hijacker wasn't just hiding their identity. They were turning the medium against itself. The first attack hit WGN-TV, Channel 9, during the 9 p.m. news. The Chicago Bears had just beaten the Detroit Lions. Sportscaster Dan Roan was narrating the highlights. Suddenly, the screen went black. Then, it exploded into gray noise. The image trembled, and then it snapped. For nearly 30 seconds, the screen belonged to the intruder, a silent, oscillating figure in a rubber mask against a rotating metal background. The audio was a buzzing, screeching void. Inside the WGN control room, engineers panicked. They scrambled to switch frequencies, physically severing the link to the transmitter. They dismissed it as a technical anomaly, a fluke. But it wasn't a fluke. It was high-level engineering. To hijack a television signal in the analog age, you needed to understand the studio-to-transmitter link, or STL. Most people assume TV signals go from the camera to your house. They don't. They go from the studio to a microwave dish on the roof, to a receiver high atop a skyscraper, and then to your house. That link, the microwave beam connecting the studio to the tower, is the weak point. It's an invisible wire stretched across the city, and like any wire, it can be cut. Or, in this case, overwritten. This is the FM capture effect. Microwave receivers are dumb. They follow a brutal rule. The strongest signal wins. If the hijacker could blast a louder, cleaner signal at the receiver than the studio could, the tower would blindly accept it as the truth. It wasn't hacking. It was a hostile takeover. And to pull it off, you had to be physically close to the target. You needed line of sight. 2 hours later, the hijacker returned. They knew WGN had shut them down, so they changed targets. They aimed their dishes at the Sears Tower, the tallest building in the city, targeting PBS affiliate WTTW. And this time, there were no engineers on duty to stop them. The station was airing a rerun of Doctor Who, the episode The Horror of Fang Rock. The signal collapsed mid-scene. The screen tore open, and the figure stepped through. But the silence was gone. This was no longer a static image. It was a performance, erratic, unfiltered, and live. For 90 seconds, Chicago watched in confusion as a man in a rubber mask put on an erratic, unhinged display on public television. The audio was distorted, metallic, and difficult to parse. But he wasn't just making noise. He was speaking. To the casual viewer, the broadcast was a garbled nightmare. But to a forensic investigator, it was a roadmap. Every stutter, every nonsensical phrase was a specific, calculated insult directed at the Chicago media establishment. Let's break down the tape. He starts by calling WGN sports anchor Chuck Swirsky a frickin' liberal. Wait, listen closer. The distortion hides the full insult. He actually calls him a frickin' nerd. Chuck Swirsky was known in Chicago for being the nerd of the sports desk. This wasn't a random attack. It was a specific, personal dig from someone who watched Channel 9 religiously. He then holds up a soda can and hums the commercial jingle. But look at the can. It's a Pepsi. Max Headroom was the famous spokesman for Coca-Cola. The hijacker was drinking the competitor's product while wearing the mascot's face. It was a layer of irony most viewers missed, a meta-commentary on brand loyalty and corporate shilling. Then he turns his anger toward WGN itself. He mocks the world's greatest newspaper, the slogan of the Chicago Tribune, which owned the station. He holds up a dirty gardening glove. "My brother is wearing the other one," he screams. He hums the theme song to Clutch Cargo. And then the infamous line, "Your love is fading," a reference not to a cartoon, but to the lyrics of the Temptations song, "I Know I'm Losing You." It was a stream of consciousness, a chaotic tour through 1980s pop culture detritus. The hijacker wasn't just mocking WGN, he was mocking the artifice of television itself, exposing the absurdity by becoming absurd. Then, the broadcast descended into total madness. The figure bent over, exposing himself to the camera, and the tone shifted from menacing to pathetic. He was swatted with a fly swatter by an off-screen accomplice, spanked, ridiculed. "They're coming to get me!" he screamed. It was a deliberate act of humiliation. He wasn't presenting himself as a conqueror. He was presenting himself as a bad child being punished. Whatever message he had ended in a shriek of laughter. And then, static. The signal died, and Max was gone. The Federal Communications Commission mobilized immediately. This wasn't just a prank. It was a federal crime carrying a fine of $100,000 and prison time. Agents from the FCC and the FBI swept the city of Chicago. They knew the physics. They knew the hijacker had to be within line of sight of the towers. They attempted to triangulate the signal source. They analyzed the video background, identifying the corrugated metal as standard industrial siding used in thousands of warehouses. They interviewed disgruntled WGN employees looking for anyone with the technical skill to override a microwave relay. But microwave signals leave no physical trace. Once the transmission cut, the evidence vanished into the air. Unlike a digital hack, which leaves logs and IP addresses, an analog hack is just energy. The trail went cold before it even started. The file remained open. Technically, it still is. But in the shadows of the internet, a compelling theory emerged. In 2013, a Reddit user named Bowrick Wowbagger came forward with a story that felt too specific to be fiction. He claimed he knew the hijackers. Two brothers involved in the local Chicago punk scene. He referred to them only as J and K. According to the user, J was socially reclusive and hyper-focused on broadcast architecture. J didn't just watch TV, he dissected it. He memorized frequencies like other people memorize telephone numbers. The user described an awkward encounter at a party where J ignored everyone to talk about antennas. The post described visiting their apartment in 1987. It was filled with surplus electronic gear, video equipment, and microwave transmitters that perfectly matched the FCC's profile for the intrusion. But just as the theory gained traction, the user vanished. The account was deleted. The Max Headroom incident was a warning we didn't understand until it was too late. It proved that our reality is delivered through a pipeline, and pipelines can be broken. We trust the screen to tell us the truth, but for 90 seconds in Chicago, the screen admitted the lie. Control is an illusion.